When Soren Whitlock sent the invitation to the woman who had once lived above the bakery with him, he told himself it was a courtesy. The kind of gesture a man extends when he has finally unmistakably won. He did not expect Maeve Larkin to come at all, and he certainly did not expect her to walk into the Rosso Grande on the coldest night of January, with two small children holding her hands, both of them tipping their heads back to study the chandeliers with his own slate-grey eyes. The first thing he noticed was not the children. It was her coat. It was the wrong coat for a room like this. A plain charcoal wool, snow still melting on the shoulders, the sort of coat a woman buys to last 8 winters instead of 1. She handed it to the attendant without apology and stood for a moment in the doorway of the ballroom while 300 guests in silk and tailored black turned, the way a room always turns towards something it cannot place. She didn't flinch. 5 years ago she might have. Tonight she only adjusted the smaller child's collar and waited. Then the little girl tugged her sleeve. "Mom," she whispered, loud the way children think is quiet. "Is this the castle?" Maeve crouched, smoothed a curl behind the girl's ear. "It's a hotel, Posy. We use our gentle voices in hotels." Soren's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. The girl had his eyes. So did the boy on Maeve's other side, who stood very straight in a navy sweater. 2 sizes too careful, frowning up at the gold ceiling as though it were a problem he intended to solve. 2 children, not 1. The fact arranged itself in him slowly, less like a thought than like cold water finding its way under a door. Across the room, his fiancée laughed at something the deputy mayor had said. Céline Dufour was luminous in oyster silk, dark hair pinned smooth, a diamond-catching light every time she lifted her wrist. She belonged to the kind of family the Whitlocks understood. The right schools, the right cottage on the right lake, the right charities listed in the right order. Soren had proposed 3 months ago on the terrace of his condo, with the whole frozen lake of the city glittering below. And the announcement had run in 2 papers and a business quarterly by the following afternoon. People had congratulated him as though he'd closed a deal. He had told himself that was the same as happiness. Then Maeve Larkin walked into his engagement party with 2 children who wore his face, and the floor seemed to shift a degree under his shoes. Soren, Céline was beside him now, her smile still in place, but her eyes already moving past him toward the door. "You're staring, darling." He couldn't make his face obey her. Céline followed his gaze and the smile held for one immaculate second before it thinned to a line. "Is that her?" she asked. He didn't answer. He was remembering the night he'd added Maeve's name to the list, 2 in the morning, alone in his office while ice cracked off the lake. He'd told his assistant it was only decent. She had been part of his life once. He had told himself that if she came at all, he would see a tired, ordinary woman, and the old ache he carried would reveal itself for what it surely was. Nostalgia, not love. He had not pictured that. Maeve found him across the room. For 5 years he'd wondered what her face would do. He'd braced for anger, for ice, for the blank look of a woman pretending 2 years had never happened. Instead, she only looked at him the way you look at weather you've decided to walk through. Then she lifted her chin, gave him the smallest nod, and steered the children toward the quieter edge of the room where the light was softer. A hand closed on his arm. "Don't," said Genevieve Whitlock, low and even. His mother wore grey satin and the family's grey pearls, her white hair cut sharp at the jaw. "Whatever this is, not here." He turned to her. There was something in her face he had not seen since the year his father's company nearly collapsed, a stillness that was working very hard to look like a calm. "Did you know?" he asked. Her expression did not change, but something behind it did. "This is not the moment." That answer landed harder than a confession. "Did you know?" he said again. "People are watching," Céline murmured. "Let them." He set his glass on a passing tray and walked away from both women, across the polished floor, and the room quieted around him in little waves the way a pond goes still when something heavy goes in. Maeve saw him coming, her hands tightened on the children's shoulders. The boy looked up at him with open, unhurried curiosity. "Are you the man from the book?" he asked. Maeve closed her eyes for half a second. "What book?" Soren said, and his own voice came out wrong, thin. The boy reached into the pocket of his good sweater and produced a small spiral notebook, the cover soft with handling. He opened it to a page near the back and turned it around with the gravity of a clerk presenting evidence. It was a child's field guide, the kind a careful boy keeps. Pages of crayon birds, a chickadee, a Canada goose, a thing labeled loon. Real, each entry marked real or UNCONFIRMED, in block letters. Near the bottom of the page, in the same patient hand, was an entry with no drawing beside it. A dad, UNCONFIRMED. The ballroom narrowed to a tunnel. The girl, Posy, peered up at him. "Mom says unconfirmed means we don't get our hopes too big." "How old are they?" Soren asked. He found he had to push the words out. 5, Maeve said. "They'll be 6 in April. 5. He heard a whisper start behind him. He heard Celine say his name with a new edge. He heard his mother take one slow, deliberate breath. He heard his own pulse in his ears. Their names. Maeve's mouth shook once, then steadied. Felix and Posey. The boy considered him. I'm Felix. I'm older by 11 minutes. It matters. Soren went down on one knee before he had decided to. The guests blurred into a glittering ring above him, but the children came level, suddenly enormous and exact. Felix held the notebook like a passport. Posey studied his cufflinks with deep suspicion. Hello, Posey, he said. You have a long forehead, she observed. A laugh escaped someone in the crowd and was quickly strangled. For the first time since she'd walked in, Soren felt his chest loosen. I've been told, he said. Do you two like sandwiches? Felix glanced at his mother for permission, then back. Are they the tiny kind? The tiny kind has less in it, but you're allowed more, so it works out. That, said Soren, is the most honest assessment of this party anyone has given me all night. He stood. Celine reached them before Maeve could decide anything, laying one elegant hand on his sleeve, the gesture smooth as a closing door. Of course you may speak with her, she said to Maeve, pleasant as frost. Old friends, perhaps after the toast. Maeve looked at the ring on Celine's hand. Congratulations, she said. The word was kind. That was what made it land. Thank you. It's a meaningful night for both families. I'm sure it is. Soren heard all of it as though through a wall. He was still cataloguing the children. The boy's chin, the girl's left eyebrow that arched exactly the way his own did when he doubted a number. Posey's habit of rubbing one thumb over her knuckle, the same thing he did under boardroom tables when he didn't want anyone to see his hands shake. He had missed 5 years. No. He corrected himself with a sudden, sickening clarity. He might have been kept from 5 years. Maeve, he said. Please. She studied him a long moment. All right, they stay with me. Of course. His mother stepped into their path. This is not the time or the place, she said quietly. The Premier's office sent someone. Celine's father is waiting on the toast. This can be dealt with privately. Maeve went very still. Dealt with, Soren repeated. Genevieve's chin lifted a fraction. Discreetly? You mean hidden? A murmur rolled through the nearer guests. He turned to the closest server. The Cedar Room, off the lobby. Have them bring sandwiches, fruit juice, nothing with nuts. And if anyone can find paper and crayons, I'd be grateful. Felix brightened. I'm out of green. Green, Soren told the server with great seriousness. Especially green. The server nodded as though it were the single most important instruction issued that evening. Maeve looked at him then, really looked, the way she used to before either of them learned to be careful. And for 1 second the years stood between them. A used bookshop on Bloor Street in February. Coffee gone cold on a radiator. Her laugh before he taught himself to be wary of anything that felt that much like luck. Then Posey yawned enormously, and the moment let go. The Cedar Room was panelled and warm, the sofas too pale for children, which meant Felix immediately knelt on one with both boots until Maeve gave him a look that turned him around without a word. Posey chose the corner nearest the lamp and murmured something reassuring to the silk shade, as though it too were nervous about being here. Soren stood by the closed door, feeling too tall, too formal, a stranger in the middle of his own life. You can sit, Maeve said. He sat. No negotiation had ever made him so aware of his hands. For a few minutes there were only small sounds, plates set down, juice poured, Posey eating one orange segment with the focus of a surgeon, Felix counting the buttons on Soren's jacket and recording the number in his notebook. Maeve moved among them without fuss. A napkin on a lap, a cup nudged away from an elbow, a curl tucked behind an ear. And Soren watched her do it and felt something in his chest crack along a line he hadn't known was there. This was not the love he remembered. This was love that had been practiced every single day in the dark without anyone clapping. I wrote to you, she said quietly. He looked up. She kept her eyes on Posey's plate. 3 letters. One when I found out I was pregnant. One when they told me there were 2. One after they were born. There's a photo in that one. The day we came home from Mount Sinai twice. The second time a security guard told me, very politely, that all personal correspondence for Mr. Whitlock went through the family's legal counsel. His throat closed. I never got any letters. I know that now, she said. There was no triumph in it, which was worse. How do you know that now? She glanced toward the door. Because your mother offered me money tonight before you crossed the room. There's apparently a trust. I sign a private acknowledgement. I leave before the photographers find us. The children are quietly provided for. She's done this before, hasn't she? The wording was too smooth to be new. Soren shut his eyes. Across the table, Felix looked up. Did the Silver Lady say something unkind? Maeve touched his hand. Grown-up talk, bud. Posey leaned towards Soren, confiding. Mom says grown-up talk's mostly people using 100 words to avoid one. Your mum, Soren said, and his voice came out rough, is exactly right. For 1 second, Maeve's mouth softened and it nearly undid him. I looked for you, he said. You have to know that I looked. The year after you left, I hired someone. A firm. I gave them everything. Your sister's name in Halifax, the bakery, the name of your old landlord. He heard how it sounded and pushed through it anyway because it was true. They came back with a report. It said you'd gone to Australia, that you'd married a teacher in Perth. There were photos, grainy, but they looked enough like you. I sat with that report for a week and then I made myself believe it because believing it hurt less than the alternative. Maeve was very still. I have never been to Australia, she said slowly. I have never owned a passport that wasn't expired. I was in a basement apartment in the East End with 2 newborns and a space heater. The room seemed to lose its air. Who gave you the report? She asked. He already knew. He'd known since the doorway, since this is not the time. My mother managed all of my personal affairs that year, he said. After my father stepped down, she said I needed to focus. New phone, new office, new everything. I let her. I was 29 and I'd just watched the company my grandfather built nearly go under, and she handed me a wall and called it Focus. And I climbed inside it and pulled it shut behind me. Maeve looked at the children. Felix had started a new entry. Posey had folded a triangle of shortbread into a napkin and tucked it into the pocket of her dress. What do they know, he asked. That they have a father somewhere. That he and I cared about each other once. That adults sometimes lose track of each other. That maybe one day they'd know more. She met his eyes. I never told them you left them. I would never put that weight on. It isn't theirs to carry. He bowed his head. Thank you. Don't thank me for that, she said. That was just the floor. The door opened. Céline stood there, no longer smiling. Behind her was Genevieve, and behind Genevieve, a photographer hovering with the studied casualness of a man pretending not to listen. Soren, Céline said, the toast is 40 minutes late. Maeve rose at once, and the children reacted to her movement, the way small birds react to a change in the wind. Felix folded his notebook. Soren stood too. Céline, I need more time. No, she said. You need a mirror. She looked at the children, then at him, and something in her expression that he had taken for poise turned out, all along, to have been hope. Soren, is there anything you want to tell me, or am I going to learn it the same time as the photographers? He owed her the truth where she could hear it. Will you give me the side room, just us? You deserve to hear it from me. Genevieve stepped forward. You are turning a celebration into a spectacle, Mother. His voice was quiet and it stopped her cold. You offered the mother of my children a check and a side exit. You handed me a falsified report and let me grieve a marriage that never existed. You will not say another word about spectacle. The photographer lowered his camera. Genevieve's face, for the first time in his memory, went unarranged. He took Céline into the small anteroom off the cedar room, while Maeve stayed with the children. Beyond the window, the city lay frozen and bright, exactly like the future the two of them had nearly chosen. Céline listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, she slid the ring off her finger and held it in her open palm. I thought I could marry you, she said. I thought I could marry you too. That might be the saddest part. She turned the ring once in the light. My father wanted the alliance. Your mother wanted the picture. I wanted, she exhaled. I wanted to stop being 36 and single at my cousin's weddings. None of that is love. She set the ring on the window ledge. Do you love her? I never stopped, he said. I let a piece of paper convince me I had. I should have driven to Perth and knocked on every door. Then don't make the opposite mistake, Céline said. Don't go charging back to her like romance fixes a man. If those children are yours, become someone slowly. Learn their middle names. Show up to the boring things. Apologize until the apology grows roots instead of flowers. She paused at the door. The little one put a cookie in her pocket. The kitchen should send extras for the drive home. The small mercy of it sat in his chest, like a stone he didn't mind carrying. I'll tell my father it ended by mutual decision, she said. And you'll tell your mother. I'm not a coach she gets to return to the shop. I will. When he came back, Maeve was buckling Posey's shoe. Felix had fallen asleep against the arm of the sofa, his notebook still in his hand. We're going home, Maeve said. I know. May I walk you to the car? The photographer. I'll handle it better than I've handled anything else tonight. She studied him, then let him lift Felix. The boy's cheek found his shoulder, warm and entirely unguarded, and the trust of it shook him more than any standing ovation ever had. He trusts before he decides to, Maeve said softly. He gets that from me. It's cost me. I won't make him sorry for it. They went out through a service corridor. At the private entrance, 2 reporters waited anyway. Soren stepped in front of Maeve and the children. "No photographs of the kids," he said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The cameras dropped, and Maeve looked at his back the way a person looks when they've braced for a fight and been handed a door instead. Her car was an old grey hatchback parked among the black SUVs, 2 booster seats inside, a folded fleece blanket, a faded loon sticker on the back window, the whole invisible architecture of her ordinary days. He buckled Felix in slowly under her instruction. Posey informed him he was doing the chest clip wrong, then took the shortbread out of her pocket and handed it to him because, she said, he looked sad, and cookies helped. Maeve closed the rear door. "I don't know what happens next," she said. "Neither do I. I need their routine protected, no announcements, no cameras, no gift so big they think love is a thing that arrives in boxes. And if you vanish the second this gets inconvenient, I will not explain you to them twice. I won't vanish. Promises are cheap at midnight. Then let me make one for the morning instead." He took out his phone, then stopped himself. "May I have your number?" "From you, not from anyone else." For the first time, something near a smile crossed her face. She gave him the number and he typed it in himself. No assistant, no forwarded message, no wall. They agreed on 10 the next morning after breakfast and after what Maeve called the daily negotiation over Felix's socks. Before she got in, she paused. "I did love you," she said. "I know. No, quietly. I don't think you knew." "Not then." She drove off before he could answer. 2 sleeping children in the back, the loon sticker catching the streetlight, and the only person who had ever made him feel seen without being impressed disappearing around the corner. Behind him, the party went on without its engagement. The next morning the condo felt too clean to be a place anyone lived. Posey's shortbread still sat on the marble counter, wrapped in a Rosso Gran napkin. At 7 he called a lawyer and asked specifically for someone who understood cooperation and not war. At 7:15 he cleared his schedule. At 7:30 his mother arrived unannounced and found him reading an article about predictable routines for young children. "This is not a strategy," she said. "No, it's reading." He laid out the rules before she could turn Maeve into a problem to be managed. No contact unless Maeve invited it. No money offered as leverage. No reputation plan built on hiding 2 5-year-olds. If anyone asked, the answer was that it was a private family matter and the children were not public figures. "You'll throw away the Dufert connection," Genevieve said, "over an old romance in a basement apartment." "I'm refusing to treat my family like a merger," he said. "And you and I are going to talk separately about a report you commissioned that put their mother in Australia." His mother's hands tightened on the strap of her bag. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, "I did what protected this family. You'll have a chance to decide what protecting this family actually means," he said. "Soon, publicly maybe, we'll see." At 10 exactly, he called Maeve. Their first real conversation in 5 years was not romantic. It was logistics. She told him about the school in the East End, about Felix's bird lists, and his need to be asked before he was lifted, about Posey who warmed slowly, and then loved with both fists, about bedtime, about the Saturday supper program she ran out of the Maplewood Community Hall, budgets, volunteers, 200 meals a week for families in a neighborhood the city kept forgetting. He wrote it all down by hand. "You run 6 divisions and you're using a pad of paper," Maeve said. "Paper is harder to accidentally forward to my mother." There was a pause. Then she laughed. Short, surprised. It was the best sound he'd heard in years. That Saturday he met them at a snow-packed playground by the lake, in boots he'd chosen with absurd seriousness. Felix examined them and pronounced them adequate. Posey carried a backpack shaped like a loon. The hour humbled him. He learned that a swing wanted rhythm, not strength, that Felix liked to be warned before any change of plan, that Posey would only cross the wobbly bridge if Maeve went first, that Felix kept a tally of every bird they saw and was deeply unimpressed that Soren could not tell a raven from a crow. "You're internally panicking," Maeve told him when Felix reached the top of the climber. "Is that visible?" "Extremely." He missed one call 2 weeks later. An investor meeting ran long, and when he phoned that night, Maeve's voice was calm and far away. "You said 10, she said. They waited by the phone. It lodged in him like a splinter. He stopped scheduling family time around the gaps in his work and started scheduling his work around them instead. He labeled the blocks UNCONFIRMED and told his chief of staff the word meant exactly that. He learned the difference between Felix's brave voice and his frightened one, though Felix maintained he had no frightened voice. He learned that Posey hid food because some quiet part of her still believed good things ran out. He learned the brand of crackers Felix considered structurally sound, and he learned that the Maplewood Community Hall sat on a block his own company had just rezoned for a tower. He found out on a Thursday when he came to return a forgotten mitten and walked into Maeve mid-crisis. A ceiling leak dripping into a recycling bin, 2 volunteers short, 20 kids gluing macaroni to construction paper, and a notice taped to the corkboard with the Whitlock Group logo at the top. She saw him see it. "You knew about this," she said, very quietly, the kids' chatter going on behind her. "I didn't," he said, and it was true, and it didn't matter, and he could see on her face that it didn't matter. "But it's my name on it, so it's mine to fix, and I'm not going to fix it by writing a check and feeling generous about it. Tell me the right way." She crossed her arms. "The right way isn't swooping. The right way is you sit in the back of a tenant meeting and you listen, and you don't talk until everyone who actually lives here has finished. And you let the people who kept this place alive on nothing decide what alive looks like next. Then teach me," he said. She blinked. The leak dripped into the bin with a hollow note, and they both looked up at it, and something in the room eased half a degree. He stayed, not because anyone asked, because there were paper towels to fetch and tables to move, and a 6-year-old whose macaroni cathedral kept collapsing. Soren Whitlock, whose signature moved zoning boards, spent 40 minutes learning that glue holds better if you press the corners and wait. The story got out 2 weeks later, not through either of them, but through a guest who turned the engagement party into a vague item in a society column. By noon, there were reporters outside the Whitlock building. By 3, his ended engagement was being narrated by strangers with a confidence none of them had earned. By 5, Maeve called once. "There are people outside the hall," she said. "No drama. The kids think it's a game where we keep the blinds down." His legal team issued privacy notices. His security director cleared the sidewalk without anyone raising their voice. He arrived only after she said he could, and found her in the hall's tiny kitchen making grilled cheese while Felix and Posey sat under a table draped with a blanket. "Our job," Maeve said, "is to keep them calm," and the color came up in her cheeks at the word "our." He didn't reach for it. He washed his hands and cut the sandwiches into triangles because Felix had a theory that triangles cooled faster. When Posey set a blue napkin beside his plate, Maeve murmured, "That means she's decided about you." "They're easy to love," he said, before caution could stop him. Then, more carefully, "I don't mean to claim what I haven't earned. I only mean, the apartment feels wrong now when I leave it. Like a room with the wrong number of chairs. That's a dangerous thing to say to a woman who spent 6 years making the room work without you. I know. I'm learning the difference between wanting a place and earning one." She looked down at the cutting board. She didn't tell him to stop. The reckoning came faster than he expected. The Whitlock Group's annual foundation gala was set for the end of February, once meant to be a glittering stage for him and Celine. Now reduced in the planning to an awkward question nobody wanted to ask aloud. The board suggested a quiet donor dinner. Genevieve, still on the foundation board, suggested cancelling. Soren refused. "The foundation funds family and community programs," he said. "So community programs will stand in the center of the room, not behind a velvet rope." He asked Maeve to consult on the community portion, not as a symbol, not as a favor, but as a paid professional. She refused twice and accepted on the third, when he sent a contract with a market rate, real decision-making authority, and a clause stating she would never be required to appear in a single photograph. "This is annoyingly respectful," she said. "I'm broadening my skill set." For 3 weeks they worked side by side. She redesigned the evening so that guests moved through the children's exhibits before dinner instead of after. She insisted the kids from the hall be listed as artists, with name cards, not props. She added a quiet room for families, allergy-safe food, and cab fare for parents who couldn't otherwise come. He watched executives underestimate her, and then, one by one, start taking notes. The gala fell on a clear, hard frozen night, the kind that makes the whole city glitter. The atrium of the arts center glowed, all glass and steel softened by paper lanterns, and the bright, crooked paintings of children. Felix carried a folded floor plan and corrected the coat check on traffic flow. Posey wore a blue ribbon and kept a single shortbread in her pocket in case anyone in the building looked sad. Maeve wore deep green, and Soren saw her across the lobby and forgot, for one dangerous second, that patience was supposed to be the whole point. "Don't say anything dramatic," she warned when he reached her. "I was going to ask whether the signage came. Liar, a respectful liar." The evening began beautifully. Donors listened, parents relaxed. Children explained their art with the gravity of ambassadors. Even Genevieve arrived, in black, her pearls bright at her throat, keeping a careful distance from Maeve that Soren chose to read as a beginning. Then the keynote donor went off his script. Lionel Thorne came from an old development family, fond of tradition and the sound of his own voice. He praised the foundation, praised the Whitlock name, praised Soren's leadership, and then turned toward the wall of children's paintings and said, with a warm chuckle, that it was heartening to see struggling neighborhoods given a hand up by people who know how to lead. The room stiffened. Maeve's expression didn't change, but Soren saw her hand close around the edge of her program. Some families, Thorne went on oblivious, just need a better example in front of them. Felix, standing near his own painting of a loon labeled real, looked confused. A mother by the exhibit lowered her eyes. Soren felt the room start to divide along its oldest seam, giver and receiver polished and practical, and he stepped toward the podium. Maeve caught his eye and gave the smallest shake of her head. Not anger, not here, not for you. Then she did something better. When Thorne sat, she walked to the microphone herself, without asking, without apologizing for the space she took, and smiled out at the room as though every single person in it belonged there in equal measure. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne," she said, "and thank you to every donor, parent, teacher, volunteer, and child who built tonight. I work with families who don't need to be lifted by anyone's idea of themselves. They need ceilings that don't leak, doors that open, buses that come, teachers who stay, and the dignity of being asked before decisions get made about their street." The room had gone very quiet. Her voice stayed warm. That was its whole power. Tonight you've seen paintings and maps and a remarkably accurate loon, all made by young people with complicated ideas and a great deal of courage. If you give, please don't give because you picture yourself above them. Give because a city is better when every child has a room to make something in, and every parent can walk into that room without being made to feel small. The applause started in the back where the parents stood, then the teachers, then the donors, some slowly, some all at once, until the whole atrium was loud with it. Felix clapped so hard his floor plan dropped. Posy hid behind her mother's skirt and peeked out, beaming. Thorne's face was the color of brick. Maeve stepped down without a flicker of triumph and went to re-tie Posy's ribbon. Genevieve came to stand beside her son. "She's formidable," she said quietly. "She always was," Soren said, not looking away. "You knew that too." His mother was silent a moment. When he turned, her face looked older than it had a month ago, and far less arranged. "I knew enough," she said, "about her, about what I was keeping from you, about what I told the investigator to find." She drew a breath. "I mistook control for love. It's a very easy mistake to make when you've never been short of either. That isn't an apology I can accept on her behalf," he said. "No, I'll owe her that one myself. She may not take it. She may not." She nodded once, like a woman accepting hard terms. And then she said the thing he hadn't expected. "I've already told the board I'm stepping down from the foundation. Effective tonight." Her jaw was tight. "It's the only consequence I have to offer that means anything. The rest I'll have to earn back if I'm allowed to. I understand if I'm not." Before he could answer, Thorne's nephew, a young board member with too much confidence and too little sense, appeared at his elbow. "Quite a speech from your consultant," he murmured, "though it does muddy the optics. People may think the foundation has gotten personal." Soren looked at him for a moment, he said. The young man blinked. Soren walked to the podium himself. Maeve saw him go and went still. He adjusted the microphone. "When we planned tonight," he said, "I thought the foundation existed to demonstrate generosity. I was wrong. Generosity performed from a higher floor isn't generosity. It's decor." Mrs. Larkin reminded us of that, not because we invited her here as a symbol, but because she is the reason this evening has any integrity at all. She listened before she planned. She kept families from becoming background. She made this room honest, which is harder than making it expensive. Maeve's eyes were bright. He let himself glance, just once, at Felix and Posy. "I've learned something this winter that I should have known a long time ago. Showing up late is not the same as showing up well. I can't repair lost years with a speech. But I can say out loud what should never have been a secret in the first place. I'm proud of my children. I'm grateful to their mother, and I intend to spend the rest of my life earning the trust they have every right to give me." Slowly, for one breath, the atrium was perfectly silent. Then Felix, with the clarity of a boy who deals only in confirmed facts, said loudly, "That's us." The laughter broke the tension, and the applause that followed was not the polished kind Soren was used to. It was messier and warmer, and it came from the back of the room first. That night changed things, but nothing turned magic. There were still lawyers and forms and careful conversations held in low voices after bedtime. Soren completed a legal acknowledgement, with Maeve's full agreement and no press. He went to parent-teacher interviews. He learned a bedtime song badly and was made to sing it correctly. He bought the structurally sound crackers without being asked. He stopped reading Maeve's caution as rejection and started reading it as the simple truth that a woman who has been let down learns to spend her hope carefully. Some evenings she let him stay for soup at the little table with the small chairs and 4 napkins, because Posey held that every guest deserved a color. Some evenings she needed the apartment to herself, and he learned not to take the distance personally. This, he understood, was what love looked like after damage. Not declarations, but repair, repeated until it held. Genevieve sent the letter of apology she had promised. Maeve read it once, set it in a drawer, and did not answer it for a long time. But in March, when Felix decided he needed an adult who knew bird facts, and Soren confessed he knew almost none, it was Genevieve, sleeves rolled, a field guide in her lap, who turned out to know every warbler in the province, and a careful, awkward truce began over a pair of binoculars on a cold balcony. In April, the twins turned 6. Maeve planned a small party at the lakeside park, cupcakes, paper crowns, a scavenger hunt designed by Felix and immediately commandeered by Posey. Soren came early with folding chairs and juice boxes and a flat of strawberries he'd chosen himself, one at a time. Posey inspected them, nodded once, and granted them permission onto the picnic table. Genevieve came by invitation, in a plain coat instead of satin, and stood at the edge of the blanket until Felix marched up and demanded to know if she was, in fact, a grandmother, and if so, whether she could be trusted on the subject of loons. On loons, Genevieve said, with the first unguarded smile her son had seen from her in years. You may consider me reliable. Later, after the cupcakes and a scavenger hunt that ended with Posey quietly winning, because she'd watched everyone else search the wrong tree, Soren found Maeve at the railing above the water. The lake was the cold, bright blue of early spring. The kids were down the path with Genevieve, who was being given a stern lesson on the difference between a raven and a crow. 6, Maeve said softly. I can't believe it. I wish I'd been there for the first 5, I know. I'll probably say that at every birthday. You probably will. She glanced at him. Will it annoy me? A little. I'll work on my phrasing. She smiled, and he stood beside her, close but not touching. Maeve, he said, I love you. I'm not asking for an answer today. I'm not asking to move fast or make this about me or turn a 6-year-old's birthday into a scene. I just need you to know it isn't a memory anymore. It's a decision I'm making with my calendar and my name and whatever patience I've managed to grow. I'd like to be the confirmed entry. She was quiet for a long moment, watching the water. That, she said finally, is the most Soren Whitlock way anyone has ever said that. Too much, a little, but I'll allow it. She turned to face him, and her eyes were wet, and she was smiling in the careful, deliberate way that had once been a wall and was now, he saw, simply a gate she was choosing to leave open. I love you too, slowly. Slowly is perfect, he said. Down the path, Felix came tearing toward them with his notebook held high above his head, Posey and Genevieve trailing behind. He skidded to a stop, flushed and triumphant, and turned the book around so they could both see. He had opened it to the page near the back, to the entry with no drawing beside it, and beneath the careful block letters that had read unconfirmed for as long as the book had existed, he had pressed his crayon down sapin so hard it had nearly torn the paper. A dad. Soren looked at the word until it blurred. Posey tugged his sleeve and frowned up at him. Your happy face is leaking again. It does that, he said. She nodded, as though this were acceptable adult behavior, and took a shortbread out of her pocket and pressed it into his hand. Because, she explained, even happy-leaking people did better with a cookie, and Maeve slipped her hand into his other one, just enough, and held on.